Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum to both the Greenville community and the St. Louis community. I welcome you to another program, mashallah, with myself as your host and our speaker today for the St. Louis community, Shaykh Hamzah Imtiaz, the resident scholar, and to our community, mashallah, our guest, Shaykh Hamzah. He joined us just a few weeks ago where we had our program where we discussed the fiqh of fasting. And mashallah, we got a lot of positive feedback on that program. Inshallah, today we're bringing another educational initiative, another educational program where we are going to be speaking about Zakat-ul-Fitr. Many of us, we simply know that Zakat-ul-Fitr is a payment that we do before the Eid prayer. However, there are certain rules and there are certain regulations, and in fact, there are even wisdoms behind this payment. Inshallah, today we're joined with Shaykh Hamzah, where he will be teaching us and educating us on this topic, inshallah al-aziz. And one thing that I'd like to mention is that this is such a topic that if you learn it one time and you understand it one time, you only have to study it and learn it one time. That's enough and sufficient. And then you can go on and you can teach your children and their children and children. And the idea of the education and the knowledge of this subject spreads from generation to generation. Inshallah, without further ado, we introduced Shaykh Hamzah just a few weeks ago, so many of you guys know he is a student of the great scholar Mufti Taqi Uthmani, the Mufti and the Grand Mufti of Pakistan, and also a student of Shaykh Ramzi Al-Habib Al-Maliki and many great scholars. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Shaykh Hamzah up, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Shaykhana. How's everything going?
Shaykh Huzaifa, how are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Glad to see your face, mashallah. I just saw a video of you last night, mashallah, where you were giving shahada to somebody, mashallah. Mashallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the strength and the power to carry on with the work that you've been doing. Mashallah, we're very pleased. I grew up with Shaykh Hamzah, and just to see all the work that he's doing in the St. Louis community is actually amazing. He's somebody who's younger than me, but I honestly look up to Shaykh Hamzah. He's somebody that I think will be an asset to the Muslim community. He already is an asset, but inshallah, I expect a lot of great things from Shaykh Hamzah. So, Shaykh Hamzah, how's everything going? How's Ramadan going? Taraweeh? How's everything?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, everything's going well. We are now in the last 10 nights. And mashallah, I hear your khutbahs every so often. So mashallah, we get a chance to see your wisdom and mashallah, the knowledge that you impart. Alhamdulillah. So it's good to see you, even if you're on the other side of the screen and the other side of the country. But alhamdulillah.
And so I don't want to take up any more time because my community sees it, but and mashallah, you're the sheikh, so I'm gonna be quiet now and let you start.
No, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. And I'd like for you to also join in, like anything you have long with me, inshallah. I'd like to hear from you as well, inshallah.
Of course.
Inshallah. So we'll begin, inshallah. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Alhamdulillah, we are now in the last 10 nights, or we will be actually in about a few hours for those that started fasting on Tuesday. And with us entering the last 10 nights, the concept of Laylatul Qadr is obviously on our minds. Obviously, the concept of Eid also at some point begins to come to our minds. And one of the most important things that is often overlooked, and it's not given its due share, is the Zakat-ul-Fitr. And one of the reasons is because we actually delay talking about the Zakat-ul-Fitr till the day of Eid or till one day before Eid. And most people, they just don't have the knowledge, they haven't heard about it, and so they're not able to pay on time. And so what we hope to do in this short session, in this short video, is to go over briefly about Zakat-ul-Fitr, about the wisdoms, and about the rulings in particular related to it, so we can have a solid understanding of what it is that we're doing and why it is that we are doing. So the first thing that's important is one of the most common causes of confusion are names, right? There's a variation of different names depending on the country you're living in, depending on your cultural background, depending on where you grew up. There's different terminologies that are used. But all of these terminologies, and there's kind of 4 common ones that I've come across, all refer to the same exact thing. So number 1, Zakat-ul-Fitr. Zakat-ul-Fitr is used very commonly on by both, whether you're Arab or whether you are Desi or whether you are from the Asian or African, kind of the eastern side of the world. Over there, Zakat-ul-Fitr is kind of seen as a universal term that is used. So Zakat-ul-Fitr is common. Sadaqatul-Fitr is also very, very commonly used as well. And they both kind of allude to the same thing, although Zakat-ul-Fitr seems to be the more appropriate word to use, because as we will discuss, the Zakat-ul-Fitr or the Sadaqatul-Fitr is actually obligatory, it's mandatory. And so Zakat seems to be the more appropriate word to use. 3 is also the fitrah. So this is a short way of saying Zakat-ul-Fitr is to say fitrah, and I'll explain what that means in a bit. And for those that speak Urdu or Persian, Farsi, fitrana is also used, very, very common. And so if you are attending a masjid in which there is a predominantly Indo-Pak or congregation of the people there, they might use the term fitrana because that's what they're more familiar with. And so, not to be confused, any of these names are generally referring to the same exact thing. Now, when it comes to the definition and understanding what it means, zakat, as we talk about when we discuss the zakatul mal, which is the normal zakat that we pay on our excess wealth, simply means that which exceeds, that which is in excess, right? And it can also mean to purify, because a lot of times when you're purifying things, the excess comes to the top. And so zakat, in a way, is kind of the excess, or what needs to be removed from us because of Allah Azza wa Jal's order to us. And as a result, it purifies us, purifies our bodies, it purifies our money. And so that is the term zakat. And fitr obviously refers to the breaking of the fast. And here it means the bigger breaking of the fast. So you have the daily breaking of the fast, and then you have obviously Eid al-Fitr, which is kind of you're breaking your entire cycle of 29 or 30 days of fasting. So because it's supposed to be given before the day of Fitr, and because it's supposed to be given, the concept is that it is for as a compensation for your fasting. That's why it is known as Zakatul-Fitr or Sadaqatul-Fitr. That is the linguistic understanding of it. Now, the technical definition is that Zakatul-Fitr is a charity, it's a sadaqah that is mandatory upon every Muslim to give to the poor before Eid al-Fitr Salah. This is the definition. And again, like I explained earlier in my other sessions, if you really understand the definitions, this definition alone has everything hidden within it. You can derive everything from this definition, but nonetheless, we'll kind of break it down and see how that works. So before we do that, let's take a little bit of a look at why is it that we give Zakat-ul-Fitr. And this is very important to know, especially if you have children. Make sure you sit with your children, make sure you tell them, tell your family, those around you, you really need to be aware of why we are giving it. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu narrates, he says that فَرَضَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ زَكَاةَ الْفِطْرِ طُهْرَةً لِلصَّائِمِ مِنَ اللَّغْوِ وَالرَّفَثِ. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam enjoined, meaning he mandated Zakatul Fitr as a purification for the fasting person. From what? There are 2 things mentioned here. As a purification from, one is laghu, idle talk, and the second is rafath, which is obscene or indecent speech. Now, these 2 things, what's unique about these 2 things is that all of us, doesn't matter how religious you are or how strictly you adhere to the spirit of fasting, at some point we end up falling into this. We end up engaging in idle talk, in laghu, and idle talk is simply talk that has no benefit, not in this world, not in the akhirah, and you're just wasting time. And although it's not technically haram, so to speak, but the concept here is that it's something that is discouraged, and it's something that takes away from the spirit and the reward of the fast. And the second part, which is actually forbidden, are obscene and indecent forms of speech. So while you were fasting, if you got angry and you swore at someone, you cursed at someone, you spoke harshly to someone, you lied, you backbited, all of these types of indecent and immoral types of speech that you may have given or you may have spoke with, as a result, what happens is that this Zakat-ul-Fitr is there to make up for that, that kind of gap that came between you and your fast due to these things. That's the first reason. The second is وَطُعْمَةً لِلْمَسَاكِينَ, that it is to feed the poor. And then he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَمَنْ أَدَّاهَا قَبْلَ الصَّلَاةِ فَهِيَ زَكَاةٌ مَقْبُولَةٌ, the person that gives it before the salah. Before the salah. So it should be given before the salah. فَهِيَ زَكَاةٌ مَقْبُولَةٌ, then it is an accepted form of zakah. وَمَنْ أَدَّاهَا بَعْدَ الصَّلَاةِ فَهِيَ صَدَقَةٌ مِنَ الصَّدَقَاتِ, and if you give it after salah is over, then it is simply a sadaqah, an ordinary charity. Meaning that the correct time to give it is actually before the Salatul Eid. So from this, we learn a few things. The first point, we talked about how it's a purification for the fasting person. And an easy example to understand is how we make istighfar after prayer, right? Because someone can ask the question that, why would you make istighfar after you just prayed? Or in other words, why would you give Zakat-ul-Fitr when it has nothing to do with your calculation of your wealth, right? In your normal zakah, you sit down and you calculate a year, from in the past year, how much money is left over, and how much money do I have in excess of my nisab, right? And then you take that out. But here, you're not doing that. You're simply, the understanding is Zakat-ul-Fitr has nothing to do with your wealth. It has to do with you being a Muslim and witnessing the month of Ramadan. So if that's the case, why am I paying after I'm fasting? One of the wisdoms, again, is similar to istighfar after prayer, similar to the sajdatul sahu. The point being that our fasting was not perfect, and so it is to make up for that. Number two, it's to make Eid a cheerful occasion for the poor and help them from not begging on Eid day. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أغنوهم, in one of the narrations, أغنوهم عن السؤال أغنوهم عن الطواف, that help your less fortunate brothers and sisters, help them by not having to beg on the day of Eid. And for many of us, we haven't experienced this, so we won't be able to relate. But if you have, and if you know someone, you'll know that begging in and of itself is something very, very difficult for people to do. When you don't have money, you're struggling, and the fact that you have to go out and beg and ask. And even worse, if you don't have something, your children are asking it to Eid day, and you have nothing to give your children, you have nothing to enjoy. Imagine how sad of an Eid that would be. And so that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, to make Eid a cheerful occasion, there's some food that they can cook for themselves, they can enjoy themselves, they don't have to go out and beg on the day of Eid, they can sit in their houses, they can cook, and they can enjoy their food. And similarly, that's why in the Eid al-Adha, we have the concept of distributing a part of your meat to the poor, again, so they can enjoy it. So both the Eids, because both the Eids are hallmarks of the Muslims, are holidays, and they're actually the only two holidays that we celebrate religiously, right? That we actually are our holidays that are days of worship as well, are the two Eids. And so Allah Azza wa Jal ordained Zakat-ul-Fitr in Ramadan for Eid al-Fitr, and the Udhiyah in Eid al-Adha, and each of them has an element of helping the poor. Also, it is to be grateful to Allah for having given us the opportunity to witness the month of Ramadan. Many of us, with the past year in COVID, and just generally hearing of different people that have passed away, the situation around the world, alhamdulillah, what a blessing to be alive during the month of Ramadan, and what a blessing to witness the month of Ramadan. And so that blessing that we had, that ability to witness the month of Ramadan, we are thankful to Allah Azza wa Jalla for having given us that, and that is why we give Zakat-ul-Fitr, and that is one of the reasons. Also, a person may ask, as we'll learn in a bit, that Zakat-ul-Fitr is to be given for everyone that is in your household, meaning everyone whose expenses you bear. So your wife, your children, maybe your elderly parents, etc., etc. So someone can ask, well, my elderly parents didn't fast, or my wife was not able to fast, because she was ill or she was pregnant, etc. Or my children are too young to fast. And so for that, there's still an underlying wisdom that you hope that you are able to fast again, inshallah. So maybe they weren't able to fast this year, but we give this Zakat-ul-Fitr hoping that inshallah Allah will give us the chance to fast again. And lastly, it's to be grateful for the well-being of your entire family and recognizing Allah's blessing. And that's why it's called Zakatul Abdan actually, as well, meaning the zakah of the bodies literally. Because you literally count the bodies in your house, like your wife and you two, your first child, 3, second child, 4. You're literally counting everyone in your house and you're giving on behalf of them. And that's very different for your normal zakah because you don't, unless the children usually don't own money, so they're not being considered in that calculation. And so, as you can see, just with the ahkam in general, there's a multivariate analysis that helps us understand the wisdoms behind a particular action. Now, who has to pay? Who has to pay? So, any Muslim who has enough money to fulfill their needs the day before Eid, the night before Eid, and on the day of Eid, they have to pay Zakat-ul-Fitr. So this is a bit different from the normal Zakat, because the normal Zakat, you have to hold the nisab amount, meaning that you have to reach that minimum threshold, and then you have to pay Zakatul Mal. But in Zakatul Fitr, it doesn't matter if you don't have the nisab, you simply pay if you are able to. Now, who do you pay for? So if you're able to, if you have enough, you have some money left over, taking out your needs for the day, then you pay for every person in your family whose expenses you bear. So as I mentioned, your wife, children, and in that time, the Prophet ﷺ, he even said about your servants, and dhakaran or untha, whether it's male or female, your children, your servants, everyone that is under you, under your expense, and you're taking care of them, you are to pay for all of them. Now, how much do you give? And this is obviously a highly contested topic, even classically. But basically, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar anhuma, and the other hadiths tell us that the Prophet ﷺ, he ordained 1 sa' of dates, or sa' min tamri, of dates, or raisins, or barley, or rice, right? And so the idea being that 1 sa', which was a measuring unit used by them at that time, and there's different estimations because obviously we are far removed from that time, but probably the most accurate estimation is about 6 pounds. About 6 pounds equals 1 sa'. So the Prophet ﷺ, he ordered for 1 sa' to be given in this, and so you can take 6 pounds of dates, raisins, barley, rice, or any food item that is the common food item in your area. Rice, wheat, flour, all of this stuff can be given, so they can use that to make food and to enjoy themselves. Now, what happened was that earlier on in Islam there was a difference of opinion here, because some of the early tabi'un, the students of the companions, and some of the early imams, they felt that that you could give it in the form of food, or you can give it in the form of cash as well, right? And so the scholars of Kufa in particular, with it being Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, Sufyan al-Thawri, etc., the scholars of Kufa, they held this understanding. And the scholars of Hijaz, the scholars of Medina, the scholars of Egypt, etc., the other kind of schools there, they held a different opinion, saying that no, you can only pay it, you can only fulfill it using the food items. Now, if that is the case, if you can only use it paying the food items, then what do you do today? Right, that's the question we have today. And alhamdulillah, kind of the advantage that we have is that we are alhamdulillah, the advantage that we have is that we are in a time where we can take from the different opinions, especially when there is great difficulty in following a particular opinion. So earlier on, like I said, Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, the scholars of Kufa, they felt this way. And from the Tabi'un, you might have heard the names of Al-Hasan al-Basri, from Al-Hasan al-Basri, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the 5th righteous Khalifa Rashid, they call him, and Ata, and other students of the companions, they said that you can pay it in cash. And so today, what we see is that there is great difficulty in paying it in the form of food items, and sometimes it's very impractical because you don't have the resources to get that food to everyone, and it's overall very, very difficult for it to go through. And many times, the people, they're not even willing to accept dates or barley or rice or any of that stuff. And so, inshallah, there's definitely space for us today, and that's why a majority of the scholars today, the contemporary scholars, they take this opinion, seeing the condition of our times, because certain opinions, they can be altered where there is room, because from the beginning of Islam, where there was no clear, explicit ruling, where there was some ambiguity left, and the Tabi'un or the Sahaba, they differed in those opinions, then inshallah we can take an opinion, and both are valid opinions. So it's better if you can give it in staple food. If not, then you can give the monetary equivalent. Now the monetary equivalent ranges anywhere from between $8 to $25, right? $8 to $25 means, the reasoning behind the large difference is because it depends on a number of factors. Number one, it depends on how the area you're living in, and number two, the particular rates in your area of those particular things. So for example, rice may be more expensive in a particular place. So the particular place that you live in, that rice is maybe more expensive than dates, where dates may be more expensive than barley. And so depending on your country, again, depending on your location, there's a variation in the amount. So 8 to 25, if you can pay the 25, the 20, or the 15, thinking based off of what's in your local area, then that's good. If not, then the minimum is around $8. If you do the math in your local stores and you kind of see how much would 6 pounds of dates, or 6 pounds of raisins, or barley, or rice, you can do the easy math. Many of the scholars have done it. Many people do it. It's about $8. It could be a little bit less or more, but $8 is kind of a safe number to give. So who do you give it to? This is pretty simple, and this is a cause for a lot of confusion. You can give it to anyone who is eligible to receive zakat. Anyone that is eligible to receive zakat is eligible to receive zakat-ul-fitr. And the common question is, can I give it to my masjid? The understanding is that, assuming that your masjid has a separate fund in which they are going to ensure that it reaches those that are in need, then you can go ahead and give it to the masjid, but you cannot give it in the general fund of the masjid or other kind of charitable causes. So that pretty much summarizes our discussion. And lastly, I will say that for those that want to pay it online, my particular masjid, the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis, they, I'll make sure I write the link here, they also have a portal where you can pay to, and mashallah, the social services, the Baitul Mal does a great job of getting it out to all those that are in need. And again, I would encourage everyone to pay it before your Eid Salah. As I mentioned earlier, that's what the hadith of the Prophet taught us. And as a matter of fact, try today, tomorrow, and these days, try to get it out before we even reach the last few nights, so that those that are in need can make use of it before the day of Eid and on the day of Eid, and they don't have to worry at the last minute, and for organizational purposes, so the organizations can get it to the right person on time. Inshallah ta'ala. And with that, we end. Inshallah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu sallam baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykhana. Jazakumullah khairan for everyone that came and watched. We had actually one question. One of the brothers, he asked, can one give Zakat-ul-Fitr to a family member who lives in overseas, or who lives overseas, Shaykhana?
Yes, so again, just as the same ruling in zakat, that you can give zakat to everyone that is not in your family from a vertical perspective. What that means is that you can't give it to your parents, you can't give it to your grandparents. Similarly, you can't give it to your children or your grandchildren, but you can give it to your siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, etc., etc. And actually, it is more rewarding to give it in your family. So if you have family, whether here or overseas, your family should be your priority, extended family, and you should try and give it to them. After family, your local community is more worthy and more deserving, and you should try and give it to your local community members. Inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykhana. So, like the Shaykh mentioned, the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis has a portal login where you can pay your Zakat-ul-Fitr. I believe it's $8 in St. Louis. For us here in Greenville, for the Islamic Society of Greenville, we have a set date. Inshallah, the set date is make sure that you pay before May 7th so that we can get the food out and we can get the things out to people, inshallah. And inshallah, it's $10. You guys can contact the masjid. You can send it to the PO box. The messages are on WhatsApp and on the email and also on the Facebook page, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. I'd like to personally thank the Shaykh for joining us today and for teaching us all about this stuff. Even myself, I learned a lot. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to everyone.
Jazakallah khairan. Really appreciate you having me, Shaykh Huzaifa. Allah yabarak feek.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.